Hello, my name is MordredViking, and I'd like to welcome you to this tutorial about diplomacy, where we're going to talk about the interactions that nations can have between each other. And at the very core of this is your relations with the other nations. So we can check this out. We're currently playing as Austria. If we click on Hungary, just beneath the name Hungary, we can see the relations. Now, this is a scale that goes from -200 as a very negative relation to +200, which is a very positive one. So we can see right here that +50 is good with Hungary, whereas if we clicked on, say, Bohemia, it's 22, Burgundy, it's 17, England is 25, Ottomans is -30, Mamelukes is -10. So you can see a bit of the scale going on right there. So what exactly do these relations mean? What are they for? Well, this is effectively your chance of getting a treaty signed with one of the other nations. So for example, playing as Austria, we may well wish to get an alliance with the Hungarians. We can do that by clicking on Hungary, clicking on diplomacy, and then to alliance actions, and then we can see here offer alliance. Now, to get any of the diplomatic interactions in the game, you just click on the country, diplomacy, and then you just have all of these expandable menus. So we're looking here at the alliance. If we hover the mouse over the check mark, we can see their chance of accepting this agreement. So at the moment, Hungary, because positive relations, are very likely to accept this alliance. And in fact, this is always yes or no. There is no RNG in diplomacy. It is just yes or no. So we're going to go ahead and offer an alliance to the Hungarians. We can see that we have a confirmation here. We'll hit confirm. And there we go. We now have an alliance with the Hungarians, and this is going to consume one of our diplomats for a couple of days. So we can see over here on the right hand side we have a list of all of our diplomats, and one of them is going to be returning in 2 days. So most diplomatic interactions are immediate. As soon as you press the button, they happen, and then it takes a bit of time for the diplomats to return home, where effectively they're recharging before you can send them out again. Another very important diplomatic relation that you're going to need to know about is how to improve relations with somebody else so they're more likely to accept your agreement. So for example, if we go over here to France, France is currently completely neutral towards us, but we're going to go click on diplomacy, we're going to go to relations actions, and then we're going to click on improve relation. Now what this does is we will send a diplomat there who will stay in France, increasing relations slowly over time. And what this will do is effectively add some relations every month until that diplomat has improved those relations by +100. Now that +100 is a hard cap. It is always going to go up to +100 with one exception. If you have a subject nation, so either a personal union or a vassal, then your diplomats can improve relations to +200. So in time, we may well get France to accept an agreement, although at the moment, if we try to get an alliance with France, for example, they're very likely to disagree. They don't trust us, which is a huge negative modifier, and they're also a historical rival. So what exactly is an alliance? Well, this is a way of binding two nations together effectively. So if Hungary gets attacked by Poland, and we're allied to Hungary, then we are going to get called into that war automatically. So any defensive war that either nation gets, they will automatically be called into that conflict. Whereas if we decided to attack Bohemia, for example, we can actually call Hungary in. And you can see here when you declare war, we'll go more into the details of exactly how this works. We have this little tab down here which is called Allies, and we can see right now that Hungary just will not accept this because they currently have a truce with Bohemia, and countries don't like truce breaking because it costs them stability. So outside of alliances, there are a large number of other diplomatic agreements that you can make with another country. A big one will be access actions. These are basically asking or offering military access to allow either nation to move armies through each other's countries. Territorial borders are sacrosanct. You cannot cross into them at all unless you have a military access agreement. Now, if you are in a war together with an ally, you will automatically have this. So you can always pass through your allied territory's territory if you're in a war with them at the time. If we did want to, for example, make a diplomatic agreement with Hungary, so I'm just going to pass through a bit of time here real quick until we hit the 12th of December where I can send another diplomat. If we ask for military access in Hungary, then that is going to be added. So we can now move troops through Hungary at will if we wish to. Now this does take diplomatic relation slots. And what these are is basically limits the number of interactions you can have active with another country at one time. So again, if we click on another country, then go down here to where the eye is, clicking on that will bring up your own diplomatic screen, which you can also access by clicking on the crest, then clicking on the diplomacy tab. And this is important because it displays right here with the two shaking hands, the number of diplomatic relations you have. So at the moment as Austria, we have 5 possible relations. Now this is relations with a singular country. So because we have an alliance and military access with just one country, which is Hungary, that uses just the one diplomatic relation. If we had 5 different treaties with 5 different countries, then that would take a relation slot for each one. So if you had military access in Poland, royal marriage with Bohemia, alliance with Hungary, that would take 3 different diplomatic relation slots. If we had 3 different treaties with just Bohemia, then that would just use the Bohemian, the number 1 diplomatic relation. Therefore, one of my recommendations would be if you have an alliance with a country already and you are playing as a monarchy, then you probably want to go to dynastic actions and try to make a royal marriage with them. And what this will do is tie your dynasties closer together. So if either of your kings dies without an heir, the other country may be able to claim them. This is dependent on your prestige. So if you have a high prestige and they have a low prestige, then you can play the marriage game and try to marry into nations with a low amount of prestige. And we can see that through the disputed succession list just by hovering over this guy with the crown. We made a royal marriage with Denmark, for example. They have 0 prestige. We have 27, which we can see up here. Then we are likely to claim their crown. But if Denmark has a fairly young leader, which he does, is only 28, then they have a pretty good chance of getting a new marriage. Whereas Milan or Imereti, whose ruler is 64, that's a bit more dangerous. Or Bohemia, which is 65. If Bohemia's ruler were to die and we had a royal marriage with Bohemia, then we may be able to get a personal union. So what's a personal union? Well, this is basically where 2 states become bound together under one ruler. That would mean that if we got a personal union with Bohemia, then Bohemia would still retain their nation, they would still retain their armies, their economy, their ability to take actions, but they would not have their diplomacy anymore. Any diplomacy that is undertaken is done by the senior member of the partnership. So for example, if we declared war on somebody and we had Bohemia as a personal union, junior member, then Bohemia would automatically be called into those conflicts. Now there are a number of nations at the start of the game that start in a personal union, one of them being Burgundy. They have a union with several of the Dutch and Belgian nations, but the big one here is Denmark, which is in what was historically known as the Kalmar Union. This is where Denmark is the senior partner over both Norway and Sweden. And you can find out a couple more details by clicking on your crest and then go into the subjects tab, which is right here. And you can see precisely how your subjects are feeling towards you. So we have a personal union with both Sweden and Norway, and then we have Holstein as a vassal, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But this screen does show a couple of important things. First of all, your diplomatic relations with those different nations. The second one being liberty desire. Now this is an important number because you pretty much always want to keep this below 50%. So Sweden at 40 is already getting a little bit dangerous. And this is important because if that liberty desire goes over 50, they will no longer support you in wars. They'll just stay at home. They'll still be in the war. They just won't fight in it. And other countries have a chance of supporting their independence to try to break them away from you forcefully. There are a couple of ways of keeping their liberty desire under control. The first one, have a big army. If you have a big army, they are scared of you and their liberty desire will be low. However, if you start suffering casualties in wars and your army size starts to shrink, then your subjects may take note of this weakness and may decide to act. Another way is by increasing development in their territories. So if we start to do a bit of development in their lands, then that will also decrease liberty desire. But the big one, I would say, is improve relations with them. So if we are playing as Denmark, we are currently improving relations with Sweden. Now remember, Sweden is a subject state, which means that our improved relations can go to plus 200 instead of the plus 100. Then we will be able to keep Sweden under our control. Now this does beg the question, well, what's a vassal? Vassals are nations you have either forcefully subjugated through wars. So if it is a smaller nation, so for example, we as Denmark declared war on Mecklenburg, we could take Mecklenburg as a vassal. This means that they are still a semi-autonomous nation. They still raise an army, they still have their own economy, but they are, just like the personal union, subject to their overlord's diplomacy. And in time, both personal unions and vassals can be diplomatically integrated. And the way to see that is if we just go ahead and click on Holstein, and then go to diplomacy and go to the influence actions, then here annex vassal. This will require you to have had them as a vassal for 10 years. You need to have at least 190 positive opinion with them. So that's either going to be through royal marriages, that's going to be through improving relations, having military access, or giving them military access, sending them gifts of money, subsidizing them. There are a number of different ways of improving relations with a nation. And if this button becomes green, you can click on it, and then you will spend a certain amount of diplomacy monarch points every month, and also a diplomatic slot. And then once that is done, then that nation will become yours. They will actually become a part of Denmark. They will lose their armies will be inherited by you, which means you basically just take over their forces. They then fly your flag, same with their navies, and their territories just become yours, and you can use them as normal. So imagine you are already integrating a vassal, or you're still trying to get an alliance with somebody, but they're just proving to be a little bit stubborn. Well, there are a couple of things you can do to enhance your strength, and the big one here would be diplomatic reputation, which again, if you go to your diplomacy screen, you can see just below the diplomatic relations. This will effectively increase your chances of having an alliance accepted, a call to arms accepted, something like that. It will also increase the speed at which you integrate a vassal. Now, one cautionary thing is if you have already integrated a vassal, there is a hidden timer almost where your diplomatic reputation will be dropped by -3, which means it's negative, which means you are never adding integration points, because basically what you're doing is you're spending your diplomatic reputation every month. That is adding diplomacy points. If you have negative diplomatic reputation, you are not spending any diplomacy points, you are not actually integrating them. And that will be shown as a modifier in here in the country modifier, so government, and then it'll be one of the icons that appears here. Just hover over them and you'll see one which is -3 diplomatic reputation. Be aware of that. Now let's talk about the more sneaky side of diplomacy. So far we've talked about the positive actions that you can take to make some new friends in the world. Well, you can also use diplomacy to undermine them. So for example, if we're playing as Denmark and we really don't like England, what we can do is we can start to send spies over to them. So if we go over to the covert actions menu, we can build a spy network. And this works very much like the improving relations. You will have a diplomat who's just there improving your spy network for a certain amount of time until you tell them to stop. And this will give you network points, basically, which you can then spend on a number of different actions. Several of these actions are locked behind technologies. So if we go down here to sow discontent, for example, we can see that this requires Diplotech level 18. It also requires a certain number of spy points, spy network points, which will then be spent when you undertake this action. Now, the important one of these to know about is Fabricating Claim. This is if you are planning a war against somebody and you want to get some expansion going, you will require a casus belli, which is Latin for cause for war or justification for war. So if you fabricate a claim with a nation, which will usually require 20 spy network points, so for every claim that you have on a country, that cost will go up by 5, then you will get the most basic justification for war, which is a conquest casus belli, which basically means that if you take any province from them in a peace deal that you have a claim on, that province will be cheaper to claim in the peace, and you will also be able to core it for less expense, which basically turns it into an integral part of your own nation. There are a number of different casus bellis in the game. So for example, if we are going to declare war on England, we can see that we currently have 0. They would be listed here under the casus bellis. We can declare war just like this. And this is called a no CB war, a no casus belli war, but it is expensive. It will reduce our stability by -2, and many of the nations around the world will really dislike this. You will develop quite a lot of aggressive expansion, which is effectively how much your neighbors are scared of you. So very rarely, very, very rarely, if ever, do you want to use a no casus belli war, especially if you're just starting out. So let's hop over to the Ottomans real quick and then just go over here to Albania. We go to diplomacy, declare war. We can see that the Ottomans start the game with a couple of reconquest CBs against Albania. And what reconquest casus belli are is basically territories which are already a core of Ottoman territory. And you can see that by hovering over the cores and claims. You can see that the Ottomans consider this a core. Any province owned by another power on which you have a core, you will have a reconquest CB on. This works very similarly to the Conquest CB, but it would be even cheaper for you to take territory. So if we were, as the Ottomans right now, to declare war on the Albanians, then we would need to take Crusader here. That would be the objective. So as long as we control this, then we would start to just automatically gain positive war score, which is a measure of whether you're winning or losing. But we would need to be careful because Albania has a couple of allies. They are allied to Venice, they are allied to Lithuania, and both of these guys would accept the call to arms into this fight. We have no allies, so we would have nobody else on our side. Then at the bottom of the screen, you can see the comparison in terms of the armies. So you can see that we have infantry, cavalry, no artillery, and a certain amount of manpower. They have infantry, cavalry, no artillery, and more manpower than we do. So we would start this fight at a disadvantage because they outnumber us, because they have allies. In this situation, it's probably a good idea to see if you can get some allies for yourself or pick another target. There are a large number of different types of casus belli, several of them a little bit more advanced. So for example, you can get trade wars about your control over different trade areas. You can get succession wars where different people are claiming the same crown. You can get independence wars where a vassal or a subject is trying to break away from you. There are lots. The other factor, which I mentioned during wars and when making peace, is aggressive expansion. So I have it listed here. This is the coalition map mode. This is going to be a very, very important map mode for you to get. It may not necessarily be here in your map mode list. You can find it in the diplomatic map mode here. It's just the coalition. Now, this is important because any nation that gets more than 50 aggressive expansion against you, so if we were, for example, to just declare war on Bohemia, no CB war, everybody's going to hate us, we can start to see this map beginning to light up. Now, everybody at the moment is green, which means that they're not immediately going to be joining a coalition against us. But if that ever goes over 50, so we can see here, Bohemian opinion of Austrian aggressive expansion, minus 48. If that ever gets to minus 50, then they may join a coalition. And if enough countries join this coalition against you, then they can all declare war on you at the same time. This is very much one of the anti-snowball mechanics in the game, which effectively stops people growing too quickly, because it's just going to force all of their neighbours to join a grand alliance against that country and just slap them down a bit. The final part of this tutorial I wanted to talk about are rivals. So again, playing as Austria, if we go to our diplomacy screen, make sure it is our own, so we click on the eye, we have this little part of the panel over here. Enemies and rivals. Rivals are countries that you have determined are horrible and probably need to die. So at the moment we have no rivals. That's what the rebel flag here means. What you can do is you can click on the shield, and this will give you a list of all of the potential rivals for your nation. Now, the list is determined by your strength and their strength. So myself as Austria, I am the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. I'm not going to be able to rival somebody absolutely tiny like, for example, Bologna here. However, other countries of a reasonably similar size, Aragon, Bohemia, Burgundy, England, France, Hungary, the Ottomans, those are all valid targets. And what this will mean is I get bonuses for being at war with them, for doing nasty things to them and generally hampering their ability to have a good time. It does list who has rivaled you. So for example, Aragon has this cross swords here. That means Aragon has declared us their rival, which is known as an enemy, as have France, as has Savoy. Now, generally, it's a good idea to try to rival people that rival you. So in this instance, for example, we've pretty much consigned ourselves to the fact that France is never going to like us. We have a very, very poor relation with them at the moment. They are our rival. We're just going to mutually do this. Now, this will give us additional prestige if we beat them in wars. We're more likely to get an alliance with anybody else that's their rival, so enemy of my enemy is my friend. Spy networks will grow quicker over them. Embargoes will not cost trade efficiency, which we'll talk about, and we have cheaper peace deals when demanding stuff from them. So we have now rivaled France, and we can see that their crest has arrived here. You can only ever have 3 rivals at a time, but an unlimited number of nations can become your enemy. With rivals, you generate something called power projection, and that is what this icon here is. And you can see that there are a couple of bonuses that happen when you have this. So if you have at least 25 power projection, you gain a free leader without upkeep. That means you can hire another general or admiral without costing you military or diplomatic points in upkeep. The other thing, and this is the really nice one, is if you have at least 50 power projection, then you gain +1 admin, diplo, and military point every month. It's like having 3 extra level 1 advisors. It's very nice to have. So how do you gain power projection? Well, the big one is go to war with your rivals. Every time you beat them in a war, you gain power projection. They lose power projection. The more stuff you take from them in the war, the more power projection you gain. Another way is embargoing their trade. So if we go to diplomacy, then go down to economy actions, and then issue embargo. This will reduce their trade power in the various trade nodes, as we talked about previously in the trade tutorial. So if you're embargoing someone, their trade power will be reduced wherever you are active, particularly where your light ships are active. It will cost you trade efficiency if you don't have them a rival, but if they are a rival, it's free. And if you embargo your rivals, you will also gain power projection. And then finally, the last way of doing it is simply by insulting them. And the way that you do this is, again, relations actions and then send an insult. So we're just going to wait until the 17th of February so that we can do this. We're going to send them an insult. And what this will do is it will reduce our relations by -50, but it will also give us +5 power projection just for insulting them, and you can do that every couple of years. So I hope this tutorial has been useful for you. There is a lot more. This is just the basics of how to get into diplomacy in the game, and I would encourage you to just explore, take a look at the different options that you have available, read the tooltips. The tooltips do give you a great deal of information about precisely what these can do, and have fun with it.